They have been able to help them mainly by doing what? Going off the androgens, cutting down the protein, and stopping the bodybuilding, stopping even the weightlifting because it was too much high blood pressure. Yeah. So they had them stop everything. Several case studies I saw, they stopped their glomerular filtration rate, which is the GFR, main metric used, and their creatinine improved. They said, okay, this guy, we don't need to get him a kidney transplant. And then the bodybuilder went back to bodybuilding. This happened many times. In many case studies, they say that he went back to this. They end with that.
Give up.
Hello friends, welcome to week 11's Q&As, joined by my lovely wife Lucie.
Hi guys.
Lucie will be asking me some more of your questions. Let's do the next one.
Next one is by our friend Morning Iron. He said, Hi Leo, I have noticed you mentioned the use of EQ in a few of your videos touching on PEDs. There is a study that I cannot seem to find reference right now that seemed to highlight the specific renal toxicity of EQ in comparison to other drugs. Have you seen or heard of this? Also, while on the subject, there is also trembolone, in which people have claimed has renal toxicity, possibly due to the BP effect. Could you discuss renal toxicity in these two compounds, specifically in terms of what is unique about each one of them to make them more renal toxic than other hormones, and how this toxicity could be managed?
Thank you so much, Lucie, for asking me that question. And thank you, Morning Iron, for a great question. I've been asked quite a few times about kidney issues, and I've never answered the question because I feel like, well, first of all, let me say I'm not a medical doctor, but I feel like it's sort of a sad subject and a difficult subject, and often answering the question doesn't provide much value. But in this case, I can see it providing some value, in the sense that basically my main point of the discussion I'm about to have with you guys is to tell you that androgens are kidney toxic on their own, not because of the blood pressure response only. So the actual androgens themselves are nephrotoxic, and they're not just nephrotoxic, the derivatives, equipoise, which is the EQ, and these what's called boldenone, and trembolone, and these ones, but testosterone itself is nephrotoxic. So that's the point of this video, and I'll tell you guys what I know about this subject. So first of all, studies, so there are three kinds of studies on the subject. One is studies on animals, one are case studies. There are many case studies. Case study means that a medical doctor who's interested in publishing, and he's sort of academic, has a patient who comes in and exhibits kidney problems, and he makes basically a study on this one guy. It's an N of 1 study. There's a lot of case studies on this subject. They're usually not that informative because they're only case studies. There is one study that was inspired by a case. We had one case, they were so curious about it, these nephrologists, that they did a study of 10 AAS users, anabolic androgenic steroid users. And that study is the most interesting study on the subject. I'm going to definitely cite this somewhere here, and I want you guys, if you are interested in the subject, to read that study. But with that said, let me tell you first of all now, just so you know, in animal studies, there are studies that have studied not trembolone in regard to nephrotoxicity that I know of, but they have studied boldenone, which is equipoise, and they've studied nortestosterone, which is DECA. In both cases found them to be nephrotoxic. But there are no comparisons that I know of comparing the different molecules. So I can't really answer that question. However, from personal experience, I'm almost completely certain that trembolone is way more nephrotoxic than any other compound. But other than that, I don't know any more details from personal experience or people I know. Now, with that said, let me tell you the results of the animal studies. What is interesting is this. The kidney health of animals, of rodents specifically, when their female rodents are overrecticized, I think it's called, when their ovaries are removed, their kidney health gets worse. So when their ovaries are removed and they don't have estrogen, their kidneys get worse. When males have their testes removed in castration, their kidney health gets better. In response to some damage, by the way. This is in response to oxidative stress. So the male rodents, when they lose their testosterone, their kidney health is protected. When the female rodents lose their estrogen, their kidney health gets worse. And when the female rodents are given testosterone, their kidney health also gets worse in a similar way. So the testosterone clearly appears to be nephrotoxic. So there are some theories also for why the androgens may be specifically toxic to the kidneys or nephrotoxic. One of them is that the androgens seem to, first of all, there are androgen receptors on the kidneys. And these androgen receptors react to the androgens that you're having. Now, how they react exactly is not completely clear, but a couple of things do happen that we know about. TGF-1 beta or beta-1 increases, which is a cytokine that causes apoptosis in the kidneys, as well as it does some other things other than cause apoptosis. It increases fibrosis, which is the scarring of the kidneys. So there are some molecular mechanisms that we know of in which androgens could cause. And by the way, these are described excellently in the paper that I told you guys about. But there are some molecular mechanisms in which you can imagine how androgens could be toxic. But more interestingly than that, when we leave the animal studies, what we encounter is in this large study, is the largest study of this situation, the 10 people that were analyzed by these doctors. What the doctors found is that in general, and by the way, you'll see this in the case studies as well, the AAS users tend to develop what's called glomerular, I have such difficulty pronouncing this word because it's glomerular sclerosis, which is basically scarring of the glomeruli, which are in the kidneys. Yeah. The scarring results from oxidative damage. As we found in some rabbit studies, what occurs is oxidative damage at the area. In fact, telomerase activity upregulates. That's the thing that extends telomeres seems to try to protect the rabbits. So we know that there is an oxidative stress damage going on there. Anyway, the glomeruli develop sclerosis, which is scarring of the glomeruli. Now, how does that happen mechanically usually? What happens is basically when the kidneys are overstressed, they grow in a response, thinking that if they grow, they can handle the stress. They have hyperfiltration demands, so they develop hypertrophy. They grow. When they grow, certain parts of the kidneys detach from each other, specifically the podocytes detach from other parts of the kidney, which causes eventually a scarring to occur on the glomeruli. So when this scarring occurs over time, the kidney loses function. Yeah, scar tissue, which also causes it to lose function. Similar, if you remember, to our discussions of liver, also develops scar tissue, fibrosis, and also. So anyway, that's what glomerular sclerosis is, which I'll call GS, although it actually has a longer acronym. Anyway, they noticed that AAS users tend to have this scarring, the sclerosis. Now, those many clinicians in the studies I've read have postulated the reasons for this. So, for example, personally, for a long time, I thought that the only thing that you can really do, other than the most important thing that one can do is control their blood pressure, I thought. And definitely higher blood pressure is the main cause for kidney failure in people around the world. But the clinicians in this specific subject, who are nephrologists, postulate that there is a polyfactorial reason for the decline, for the sclerosis of the glomeruli. Specifically, they think that, number one, higher body mass in general, but including higher lean body mass, seems to. So by the way, guys, if you don't know, obese people, very large obese people, tend to have problems with their kidneys as well. But just being larger increases the filtration demands on the kidneys, causing that hypertrophy, causing the breakage, causing the sclerosis as well. Also, they postulate that the protein intake, which many of the clinicians have noticed people were taking over 500 grams of protein a day, like Milos Sarshev recommends to his clients. He had Nasser also take 500 grams of protein a day. Nasser, as you guys know, had kidney failure, and this stuff happens very frequently at this high protein intakes. What happens with the high protein intake? Nitrogenous waste that accumulates from the protein has to be filtered by the kidneys. Again, hyperfiltration, causing the same process of scarring and hypertrophy and so on. Also, they postulated that maybe the blood pressure would be a cause, but what they noticed in this group of 10 people that they had is that 6 out of 10 of them did have hypertension, like moderate hypertension, but they did not have a lot of arteriosclerosis. They did not have a lot of sclerosis in the arteries of the kidneys, which indicated to them that the overall sclerosis is probably not due to just the blood pressure. So, but interestingly, by the way, they made a note, which I hope you guys read the article so you can see this, because I mentioned this before, which is that while working out, your blood pressure goes to very high levels. So I've mentioned this to people before, and I think that people didn't realize and now I found a citation for it. They estimate that blood pressure can go as high, systolic blood pressure, as 400 instead of the average of 120, which is supposed to be ideal, during the actual lifting. And they postulate that this higher blood pressure, even though it's episodic and very short, can permanently damage the endothelial function of the kidneys. However, they say that they don't think the blood pressure is the direct cause of it. They think that the blood pressure may be a cause of it, and certainly if your blood pressure is 200 over 100 something for a long time period, you're going to destroy your kidneys for sure. But they say that the androgens toxicity to the kidneys is the main factor that they're concerned about. But it's a combination. So the size of the person, the protein intake, and definitely the blood pressure, but also the androgen being directly toxic to the kidneys.
So let me ask you one thing. If somebody is doing a cycle, taking androgen, if they stop, is it the kidney damage is reversible or not? And would post-cycle therapy help them?
Very good question. So first of all, this is really interesting. A bunch of the clinicians that I read about speculated that the damage is irreversible. Like, for example, not clinicians, but academics, biologists. For example, in the rabbit study I mentioned earlier, they speculated that the damage to the kidney is irreversible. The kidney is an organ that doesn't like to recover. It's a very unpleasant, very complicated organ, very beautiful, complex organ, but not very fragile, really. Now, with that said, many of the bodybuilders who went in with the glomerulosclerosis, who had, some of them went in, I've seen case studies where people went in and they're immediately put on dialysis and looking for a kidney transplant. It's done. And the pictures of the body they look the wonderful health, their body is muscular and everything, but they are dying inside. And these kidneys, what happened is they're not actually large at that point, they're shrunken because they're just dying. But broadly speaking, they have been able to help them mainly by doing what? Going off the androgens, cutting down the protein, and stopping the bodybuilding, stopping even the weightlifting because it was too much high blood pressure. So they had them stop everything. Several case studies I saw, they stopped. Their glomerular filtration rate, which is the GFR, main metric used, and their creatinine improved. They said, okay, this guy's, we don't need to get him a kidney transplant. And then the bodybuilder went back to bodybuilding. This happened many times. In many case studies, they say that he went back to this. They end with that.
Give up.
They're like, we tried, but he went back to it. And then they don't hear from him again.
Study that shows long term if they completely stop, does the kidney recover?
No, there's no such study. In fact, there are very low studies. Let me tell you to be clear, nephrotoxicity of androgens is the least studied side effect of androgens. It's the least overall. It's less than heart, less than kidney, less than liver, less than everything else. So now about post-cycle therapy will be only helping them to restart their own testosterone, which again could be harmful even for this. It seems that the androgen is not great overall. Castrating yourself may be better than restarting your androgens. So it may be better not to do post-cycle therapy. But it's we're joking around, but it's not a laughing matter because there are people really truly suffering, and my heart goes out to them. And I was always very concerned because I used androgens for a long time period. And this, I was hypochondriac about the kidneys because I know that it's the silent killer. It can happen without you realizing. It's hard to judge unless you're using statin C as a biomarker. It's hard to judge if your biomarkers are getting worse, as by the way, all the clinicians mention, because your body mass is so high and you're eating so much protein in the first place. So it's hard to know if something's going wrong until it does go wrong, and then your life's over. It's over. You've dedicated your whole life to this thing, and you cannot, even you get a kidney replacement. There are people like, there's a guy called Flexibility Bodybuilder. He got a kidney replacement and he went and competed again. There's another bodybuilder, I forgot his name also, got a kidney replacement from his sister or his cousin. He used to work with Amin, and this guy went and bodybuilded again. He's still bodybuilding. He lost the other kidney, and now he's on dialysis, which means they clean your blood for you with a machine, and he's still keeping his muscle. People are do crazy things, but basically your life's over at that point. You have to change gears. You either become a coach or you become this, or you choose a different part in life. And so it's a very sad situation for people, and my heart goes out to all of you. And look, a lot of people ask me, how can I heal my kidneys? And I usually don't respond because I don't have a good answer, and I don't want to get your hopes up. I don't really have a good answer. Sure, there are some herbal supplements that have shown to reduce oxidation at the kidneys. Like, I forgot one of the more famous, I don't know why I forgot this, I know it very well, but there are some well-known ones like that are prescribed to people by coaches and stuff, but all these things do is reduce the stress on the kidney. They don't heal the kidney. They may improve the filtration rate, but that's because the kidney is less stressed. You're not going to heal from my knowledge. I hope that you can, but I don't know how, personally. And that's why I was so scared of it.
Okay.
So, point is, guys, what I wanted you to know is that androgens are themselves nephrotoxic, apparently. So that means that not only testosterone, but everything else. And of course, the bigger your body weight is, the more you use like Milos Sarcev's program of 500 grams of protein, the more bloated you are in the off season, because it's not just muscle, it's fat, it's water, all of that stuff, the harder your kidneys have to work. And basically, the truth is that the bodybuilding and powerlifting lifestyles are innately nephrotoxic. They include getting bigger, they include having episodic high blood pressure when you're weightlifting, which is one reason people think that weightlifting may not be great for your health, because you're getting really high blood pressure and really straining. in those moments, and especially if you're a powerlifter, you know. And they include the use of these agents as well as the androgenic agents, and they have the high protein, or I mentioned already high protein. So high protein, the size, the lifting itself, and the androgens. All of these things combined together being nephrotoxic. So it's not a great situation. And to answer your question, nobody really knows which drugs are worse, but I have a very strong suspicion that trenbolone is much worse. I felt it myself when I used to use trenbolone many years ago. So thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next time.